All right, we got to have a serious conversation. It's been about 17 years and Pluto's not been a planet. And I know some of you out there are still mad. You're still holding a grudge. Man, don't get on your bad side. I understand. You're very mad about Pluto. I was with you too. I thought Pluto should stay a planet till I was convinced otherwise. And so today on our show, we're going to be talking about Pluto and a little bit about what happened to it, why it was a planet, and why it's not a planet, and pretty much the problem with Pluto. All right, so I know this is going to be really controversial to a lot of people. They have this soft spot for this little icy world that, I don't know, you've never even seen. It's like 4 billion miles from the sun, super teeny tiny, but people love Pluto. There's something about it. I don't know what it is about this inanimate object that's so cold and dark, but whatever it is, people love Pluto, and I love Pluto too. Now, just because I don't think it's a planet anymore, is that any reason to be mad at me? I don't think so, but I also did write a book about this too. So just to be, everything out on the table here, I do not believe Pluto is a planet, should not have been a planet, and probably will never be a planet. So I did write this book called How to Teach Grown-Ups About Pluto, because what I found is that there's a generational divide. There's people of a certain age that think Pluto should still be a planet, and they are really mad about it still. And so I thought I need a guide for kids because, frankly, kids don't care. They don't care one way or the other. They think, they don't even know what Pluto is, first off. So I thought that they need a guide to walk through their traumatized adults through the loss of a planet. And so that's what this book was made to do. So I want to go through a few of the steps on doing this because I had a transformation too. I was mad about Pluto's demotion as well, but I came out to the other side. And so I'm hoping this will help you if you're feeling uncertain about this. So my book is kind of trying to get a real lighthearted look at this, but also kind of apply some scientific principles as well, because this is kind of what happens when kids hear about this stuff. Is kids come up to me and they're asking me all this stuff, questions about space and galaxies and Jupiter and stars and that kind of stuff. And then there's a grown-up that comes in, bursts into my talks and is like, hey, Pluto should still be a planet. And I'm like, rude, man. I'm talking to people here, and we were talking about Pluto. And so I thought, we got to have this, talk with grown-ups to stay calm down. So I wrote this kid's book, and when I put this one part in, I was really surprised they were going to do this because I don't know of any kid's book that illustrates the 5 stages of grief. I don't know if anybody's ever made one kid's book with it illustrated, but this is the 5 stages that people that are mad about Pluto go through. You start off with denial, or no way, Pluto's still a planet, forget about it. Then there's the anger, which is kind of close to denial, but it's they tell you to be quiet and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, don't tell us that. Then you have bargaining. It's if we keep Pluto a planet, we could keep those other ones we found too, and let's make more planets. That's bargaining. Then the depression sets in when they realize it's gone forever. It's not going to happen. But finally, I hope we can get people to acceptance that, this is a good thing. Science has prevailed. Science has shown us that Pluto is something other than a planet. What it is, well, I guess we'll kind of find out. So kind of what happened with me is that I learned a little bit of history behind planets because there haven't always been the same number of planets in the solar system. Astronomers have thought, all different types of numbers. And so I wanted to look at different times in history as to how many planets there are in the solar system. And so, I don't know, what do we got? 8, 9, 10,000, 5,000, whatever. Let's look at different moments in history to see what the answer to that question is, because it's changed quite a bit. So let's say we look back, to now. What do we got? We got our 8 planets. So I'm just gonna stay it up. Yeah, why not? So we're gonna look over here. We got our 8 planets over here. We got our 4 little ones, close to the sun: Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. And then we got our 4 big ones over here: Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. So that's kind of how we break down the solar system nowadays, with 4 little planets and 4 big planets. But if you asked that question in the past, oh yeah, by the way, don't send your hate mail to me, because I have no pull in this whatsoever. I cannot tell you, I cannot vote on what a planet is. Only these people can, the International Astronomical Union. They are the official deciding body for this. I am not a member. They don't want me, so I can't do anything. They're the only ones that can. So send all your letters to them wherever their address is, in some European castle somewhere in the sky. That's probably where they live. But what we're going to be talking about is how many planets were there at different times in history. So if we go back 20 years ago, we had 9 planets. Pretty cool. Because look, there's Pluto there on the end. He's very excited. So, all right, we had 9 planets back then. Great. All right, so, but what if we go back a little bit farther in time? Let's go back to 100 years ago. This was before Pluto was discovered, so we only have 8 planets. Back to our 8 planets again. All right, I better sit, because I think I'm blocking some little planets. That's all right. Okay, so back on over here. And so now we're back to 8 planets. So what if we go back even farther? Let's go back 170 years ago, back before Neptune was discovered. And we're down to, well, wait a second. We're up to 18 planets. Wait a second, 18 planets? How is that possible? 170 years ago, what is that? 1850s. 18 planets, what am I talking about? We got the 8, but then we also got 10 asteroids that were considered planets for a number of years, quite a few years, in fact. So kids back in the 1800s were learning about the, 18, 20, 24. They even got up to like 30 planets because they were considering asteroids planets. But astronomers kind of decided in the 1850s, let's kick those asteroids out. They're not planets. So they were the first planets to be demoted, actually, and got kicked out of the Planet Club. And I know everybody at home, you're really still mad about when they kicked those asteroids out of the Planet Club. Remember that? I know you're still mad about it, just as mad as you are about Pluto being kicked out of the Planet Club. It's the same thing, I know. Yeah, you're harboring that. I definitely know that. But there's even worse things that happened in the past. Well, if you ask this question 500 years ago, how many planets were there? No asteroids, no Uranus, no Neptune. How many were there? The answer is surprising. There were 7 planets in the solar system back then. Wait, 7? How many we got? We got Mercury, Venus. Earth does not count. Earth was not a planet because it was just the Earth, so it was something else. So you got Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. That's 5. Sun, Moon. Those were considered planets back in the day, the sun and the moon. Well, we kicked those out of the Planet Club too. And so, if you're really mad at planet demoters, boy, I got one for you. Get your hatred ready. I want to hear some boos coming through the camera, because this is the guy that kicked out planets. Copernicus. Boo, boo. It's so funny. But I do this like with an audience, and they actually boo Copernicus. I think it's hilarious. I'm like, why? How can you boo Copernicus? Anyway, boo if you want to. So Copernicus, when he discovered that the planets went around the sun, it made no sense that the sun should be a planet, and it made no sense that the moon should be a planet, so they got kicked out of the Planet Club. But he also added something. He made the Earth a planet. So I know this is kind of the guy that you want to love to hate or hate to love, whatever it is, but he was the guy that kind of started this whole thing. So we got a history to planets being kicked out of the club. That's a precedent. So we've had planets kicked out, we've had planets added, and we've had them kicked out again. So this happened before. But what happened this time to convince us that Pluto should be out? Let's find out. All right, so the story behind Pluto's discovery is a little bit part of the game here. And this is the guy that kind of kicked it off, at least to make it successful. This is a guy named Percival Lowell, who was just this kind of like, private businessman who had a kind of an astronomy hobby, but he really loved it. And so he decided, you know what? I'm gonna make an observatory, a private observatory that we can start hunting planets for, and hunting for Pluto. And so he founds the Lowell Observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona. He begins a survey to try to find Pluto, or try to find this new object called Planet X. So, because they didn't know it was there, so they didn't have a name for it. And so he did this search with this gigantic telescope and found nothing for years and years and years. And so he finds nothing at all, and finally passes away in 1916. The observatory continues, and this guy finally has success. A young farm boy, 20-something-year-old named Clyde Tombaugh is the one who discovers Pluto. And he did this by, well, how you discover planets that are really, really far away is that you look for it moving across the background stars. So the stars will all stay fixed while a planet would move slowly across the sky. So looking for Pluto, this is the two pictures that he took. So he took one picture at one point, comes back weeks later, takes another picture of the same spot. If something moves, it would be a planet. So here's the two pictures. Hold on, it took me a second to find it. Okay, hold on, let me show. All right. One right there, one right there, one right there, one right there. Yeah, not a lot, is it? That's not a lot to go on. This is a lot of eye strain trying to find these kind of planets with this kind of system. But he did it. And you can figure out how far away from the sun this is. You can figure out how fast it moves. But they couldn't really figure out how big it was. But it went around the sun, check. For 1930, that's all you really needed, is to go around the sun and you'd be considered a planet. Well, as long as you're not an asteroid. But some interesting Pluto trivia, just in case you want to follow along at home for this kind of stuff, is the symbol for Pluto, the PL, that's the official symbol, is also a code for Percival Lowell, who started this. And by the way, I gotta say, there is a little, just a smidgen, about this Pluto debate. Has to do with that this was found in America. This is the only American found planet out of all the planets. So I think that has a slight factor. I don't know, just a little bit. I'm just throwing it out there, maybe not. But the name Pluto was suggested by an 11-year-old girl named Venetia Burney. She was just sitting around with her grandfather when it was discovered. And her grandfather was an astronomer, or at least friends of astronomers. And he said, I don't know what they're going to call this thing. And she's just like, hey, Pluto. And that was it. Made some calls, done. But the most remarkable thing about the Pluto story is, you know who Pluto was in mythology, right? The god of the underworld, basically like the devil. And somehow, some company figured out how to market this and make it into a cute little dog, and you totally forgot about the other thing. It's fascinating. Came out the same year. Pretty good. All right, so everything's going great. They find Pluto in 1930, they make it a planet, they make a dog about it. Everybody's loving this. So what happened since 1930 to force us to kick Pluto out of the Planet Club? Well, there are some warning signs. Number one, it was very, very small. So diameter-wise, it's about 1,400 miles across. That's pretty small. It's like from Cincinnati to Denver, not exactly a big place. Number two, it's mostly made of ices, so you could if you put it on a Cincinnati sidewalk in the summer, it would melt into a big puddle. Number three, it has a weird orbit. It switches places with Neptune for 20 years in its orbit, so it's actually closer to the sun. And it's also tilted more than any other planet. So, but all those things, astronomers are like, that's fine, whatever. It's weird, it's a cool thing. So what happened was, here's our two real guys that took this out. Now, if you wanted to call the demotion of Pluto a crime, here are the two accessories to the crime. We have Mike Brown, who's on the top, who actually probably gets more credit, and Neil deGrasse Tyson on the bottom, who, well, to the public gets more credit, but it's mostly Mike who did this. But Neil deGrasse Tyson started this whole thing. In fact, when he was kind of emerging as the astronomer, as like Carl Sagan's heir, he kind of made his name for himself when he did a renovation of his planetarium in New York City, the Hayden Planetarium. They made a display with the planets, but Pluto was not one of them. And so it was over in a corner down on the shelf, and people were like, where's Pluto? He hid Pluto. And Neil said, well, it's not a planet. But nobody else said it was not a planet before he did. Like, you know, so when I heard about this, I was like, first off, good vest. I like that. I had like, I feel like I had a placemat of that vest back in 1993 or something when I was in college. But anyway, good vest. But second, I was like, who does this Neil deGrasse Tyson guy think he is? You can't just like go around demoting planets. You know, we have a process, don't we? I didn't know because we never kicked a planet out in my lifetime. So I didn't know what you did with planets. But he went rogue and I didn't like it one bit. And so this is people like browsing around. They're like, where's Pluto? Where's Pluto? And so he got a lot of flack from this. He got a lot of letters. He got like hate mail. He got all sorts of things about this because he didn't go through whatever the process was. And so it got so bad that people were like really mad. And they were saying, you know, hey, if he can downgrade Pluto, then I'm going to downgrade his planetarium to a movie theater. Man, I don't know. That might not be a slam in your world, but in my world, that's like, oh, that cuts to the bone because you do not want to be working in a movie theater as a scientist. I mean, they're real touchy about that stuff. So that one really hurt when they, and that was nice that the illustrators, you know, put my idea in there. And I snuck in that Spaceballs thing too, so it's pretty good. So now there's him, but that was just like kind of the public face about it. But what was going on behind the scenes was astronomers were finding all sorts of other stuff. So Pluto was found in 1930. Nothing else, nothing was found out in that part of the solar system again until 1992. So 1992, astronomers start pointing their telescopes out there again. I don't know, I guess they were bored or something like that. Well, actually what happened is they started using digital photography, which helped out a lot. And they started picking out these other little blobs that were moving very slowly. So there's one, here's another one. And so this is the pictures that they were looking at. Instead of like just taking a picture and waiting, you know, months, they could take pictures more often and see how things slowly move. So they start finding a few dozen of them. Then they start finding a few hundreds of them. And then they find something bigger. And so this is where Mike Brown comes into this. He's a astronomer, and I call him Discoverer of Worlds. He also wrote a book with one of the best titles in it. So he really likes taking on the villain role of this thing. I appreciate his candor on this as the man who killed Pluto. Man, I need that as a title somewhere. Well, he already got it. So now what he did was he kind of laid it all out because what happened, well, I was going through the stages of grief here. I was like in denial first. I was in anger second. I was mad at Neil deGrasse Tyson. Then I was into bargaining. And I remember this very clearly. I was at the observatory with my predecessor. His name is Paul Knorr. We're talking about the Pluto debate happening. And I said, you know, I mean, what's going on with this? What do you think? He's like, yeah, I don't know. I don't care. But I was still trying to say, like, all right, what if they find something bigger than Pluto? Because I thought size was a thing. And so I said, all right, I'll think about it again if they find something bigger. Within 2 weeks, he found something we thought was bigger. At the time, he found this object called Eris, which turned out to be just a smidgen smaller than Pluto, but at the time, it looked like it was bigger by at least a couple dozen miles. But so Eris comes out and found. And then I'm like, oh man, now I gotta go to the depression stage because this was the bargain that I had. And so everybody was thinking, all right, great, Eris, new planet. We're gonna have 10 planets in the solar system. This is gonna be awesome, great. No, didn't quite catch on. And Mike Brown himself was the one who said, no, I did not find a planet. Eris is not important enough to be a planet. It shares its orbit with all these other things that we've been finding. Just because it's bigger than them and just because it's rounder, nah, that's not a planet. And you know what? Pluto's not a planet either. Whew, man, and here was the guy that could have benefited the most from a new planet. I mean, he could have cashed in on that. You don't even know who Mike Brown is, but he could have been the discoverer of another planet. And he said, no, I don't want it. Made an impression on me. When I met him in person and he told me all that, and he said that was, even in his family, they're not really happy about all this. And I was like, man, make it a planet. He's like, no, I can't be. It's not a planet. I was like, well, he would know. He's a pretty good astronomer. So I got convinced. So he found a lot of other things out there too, like Maki Maki, which is another object almost as big as Pluto. Another one called Haumea that's shaped like a football, which is really pretty cool. So lots of really amazing stuff out there to be found. And that's the thing, is that when we talk about the Pluto debate, we forget about all the things we found. And this world, Haumea, is wild. And I got another one to show you here in a second. All right, so now's the time where we get to a segment called Hey Dean. This is what happens when anybody finds out I'm an astronomer. They just have questions about space. We even had somebody here the last time I was here that just walked by. They're like, hey, are you the guy? And I was like, yeah. He's like, I have a question for you. You have to preface it with Hey Dean. So my Hey Dean question this week is, Hey Dean, I heard somewhere that Eris almost had a different name. First off, I know it's not a question, but still, not a bad statement. Did Eris almost have another name? Absolutely. It was, okay, it wasn't that close, but at least had an idea for a joke name. And so here's an artist rendering of Eris and its moon, Dysnomia. And so Eris means the goddess of discord. And so when I had the illustrator do this, I thought for my book, eye patch. Makes a lot of sense. So this is Eris, the goddess of discord. So number one, that's kind of a cool little joke, because Mike Brown, the discoverer of this, said, oh man, that's a perfect name, because people are gonna be really mad about all this stuff, because Eris really started this whole thing about Pluto not being a planet. And so called it the goddess of discord, but the initial name was not this, but something very strange. It had to start with an X because it would have been the 10th planet, and that whole thing of called Planet X. And so Mike Brown's original idea was to call it, Xena. Wouldn't that have been so awesome if that thing was called Xena? And yes, it was about Xena, the warrior princess. Mike Brown's a big fan of the show, as you know, back in the day when this was a big thing. And so he wanted to call it Xena, but decided on Eris. And so the tragic part about this is that, did the actress Lucy Lawless ever hear about this possible honor to have an object in space named after her? And the answer is yes. And she even called him. Like that week, she called Mike Brown and he didn't answer because he thought it was a prank call. Man, it hurts. So there's one extra anecdote to this, is that moon. The moon of Eris has the name Dysnomia, which, are you ready for this? Means the goddess of lawlessness. Oh man, if you're thinking like astronomers are boring, I mean, look at this. Like, he was gonna call it Xena, but then he still kind of did after Lucy Lawless, goddess of lawlessness. That's the other thing I want to point out, is that people that think Pluto is not a planet, those people are a lot more fun. All right, well, thanks for tuning in here tonight. There's just so much to cover with the problem with Pluto that, guess what? We have to do a part 2. This was only part 1. We will continue this as a 2-part series. I don't know, maybe we should make a 4 or 5-part series. Huh? Yeah, let's go 2. We'll just go 2-part series. There's so much to this Pluto debate, and there's so much fun to this too. I hope you enjoy it. So tune in for the next one. Will be coming very soon. But if you like this show, definitely hit the like, subscribe, share, all that kind of stuff. We'd love to have you join us for this all week, every week. And yeah, we'll talk about Pluto again next week. But everybody, stay up late and stay up all night with me.